Good evening, everybody, all our open data friends. We continue Russian Open Data Day, and this is an international session on our Open Data Day. During this session, we have two international speakers. It's Jeremy Rollison, Senior Director of European Government Affairs, Microsoft, and Godfrey Takaravasha, Data Manager at the Humanitarian Data Exchange. And also me and my colleague Sarkis Darbinian represent Russian community. I will be talking finally about some Russian situation in the international context, and Sarkis will be talking about legal aspects of open data all around the world. So it will be a very brief introduction, and I would like to invite Jeremy to talk about Microsoft and its open data initiatives. Jeremy, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Ivan, for the nice introduction. I'm really happy to be here today. So thank you for the invitation. I think today is International Open Data Day, in fact. So it's a good moment to talk about some of this. And I'm going to share some slides to talk about, indeed, our open data campaign, which we launched last year. And really, let me make sure we're seeing the right slides. Everyone see my screen okay? Good. So Microsoft has had an interesting journey with open data. We, as people know, there's been a lot of traction with some of our developments in an open source context. I think the path that our company has taken and some of the transformations that we've undergone, we've really learned a lot from the open source community. If you think back years ago, where Microsoft was positioned with much more of a closed approach to this space, we've gone much more open, and I'm really proud of that. And I think a lot of what we learned was from our open source experience. I think what you'll hear from me today is a simple message that we believe that the most successful companies of the future and the most successful projects of the future are going to be those that are most open. Now, that does not mean open in every single sense, and not every scenario may necessitate a completely 100% open process, but the more that we can be collaborating in this space, I think the more success we will have. Everyone is aware of how much data has been generated over the past several years and how much data is generated every day. I don't think I need to surprise anyone with this information, but we're only seeing this continual explosion of data creation. And that data has a lot of different value, but it only has value when it's leveraged by the right type of professionals with the right type of skills, using the right type of computing technologies to really unlock that data and unlock that value. We believe that it's going to be very difficult to be successful at AI without collaborating with others. It's very unlikely that any organization has enough data on their own to be successful at the next generation AI applications. So we're going to have to work together. And sometimes this comes very clear in some of the societal challenges that we have in front of us. These are things that cross borders, whether it's the COVID pandemic or climate change. Being able to look and collaborate on different data sets that emerge from one region to the next really shows you where some of that benefit can come from. If you think about the recent pandemic, if we only limit the data we're looking at to one region or one jurisdiction, we miss out on some of the learnings that we've learned elsewhere. The same will be true in a climate context. And it's a contribution of that data. It's the collaboration and cooperation of researchers who are looking at that data. And it's the use of technological tools that help unlock some of these insights faster than ever before. Another example of this is certainly linked to the pandemic, where we've combined some of our data sets linking up with the World Bank to provide more information for people seeking employment who may have been displaced by the pandemic, for policymakers to look at which skills are in demand in their locations, for employees to look at what's available on the market. You know, this is all possible because of the different data sets that we combine and the different platforms that we can use. Once again, driving some of these outcomes that I think benefit everyone across border. Now, before we get too excited, you know, there is a challenge here. There's a lot of reservations about being more open with data. There are economic interests at play. Sometimes people would like to be very open with data, but only in their country, or maybe only within their company, or maybe only within their project. But we do see this growing data divide. Fewer than 100 companies collect over 50% of the data generated by online transactions. Much of this data is stored but never accessible. A lot of this data also finds its way into a concentration of certain companies, certain sectors, and certain projects. This develops talent around that in certain jurisdictions and in certain areas, but that divide continues to expand if others don't have the opportunity to access the same data, to learn using the same tools and products and services. And we just see this divide expand and expand. The other big issue, and I know this is prominent in Europe, is that we do see more and more of this falling into the hands of a concentrated set of regions. Very often it's the US and China. That gap and advantage can only grow to the point that it could become insurmountable if we don't take a different approach. I think we don't want one or two alternative models to be the only ones available. AI is too important and the possibilities with data are too vast for us to really rely upon only one or two countries to take the lead on this. We think the benefits can be spread out much more broadly, and there are many, many different ways. So one of the ways of addressing this data divide is the open data campaign that we have launched. We want to make sure that every organization and even individuals can realize the benefits of data in AI by having access to the skills, the talent, the technologies, and ideally the data that they need to drive local results and broader results than that. The more open we can be, we believe, the better. But sometimes we confuse people with this. Does this mean, that we're open by default in every single scenario? Not necessarily. I think what we mean is we want to be as open as possible and only as closed as necessary. You can imagine scenarios when it comes to trade secrets or IP or particularly personal data sets where it wouldn't be appropriate to make that available for reuse by just anybody. But we are excited about what some of the technologies can do to mitigate some of those risks. We want to be as open as possible, particularly when it comes to things like non-sensitive data. With commercially sensitive data, there's still ways in which to address that sensitivity to make the value therein accessible to others. And when it comes to personal data, there are privacy concerns naturally, but at the same time, the development of new technologies and new research methods to access some of the value there without sacrificing privacy, we're really excited about. So what we have done with this campaign that we've launched 1 year ago is setting out a principled course. We've established several data collaboration principles that we want to lead with, and any projects that we're involved in, we want to see those principles at play. We're committing Microsoft to greater collaboration with our customers and our partners to highlight what can be done when people collaborate on data in certain projects and make that data available for reuse by default for others to build on that progress. And the other contribution we're making is launching more and more software tools and technologies to make data sharing easier for all of those different scenarios. But let's not understate the challenge. These are just some of the reluctant answers that we get from customers and governments and others about why they don't want to be more open with data, whether they're fearful that they'll lose some of that value and others will make more out of it. There are security issues, there are privacy issues, and of course some people feel as though making that data available will just enrich others and the value won't come back. We think some of this can be addressed with legal frameworks. We think this can be addressed with technology. And we're going to have to focus on shifting some of these mindsets and leading with examples, some of which I'm going to share very shortly. An example of this is what we're doing in a confidential computing context and developments around differential privacy, where you can make certain data sets available for reuse and for others to examine without necessarily putting out the raw data in its simplest form. You can, in a privacy context, we're really excited about what's possible in differential privacy. And if others aren't familiar with that, it's basically injecting some false results into data sets where you get many, many privacy gains, but you sacrifice a bit of accuracy for a lot of privacy benefits where re-identification then isn't possible. And in many use cases, that can be enough for coming out with some of the conclusions and insights that you're hoping to draw from that data. Whereas in confidential computing, we talk about data that remains encrypted. We create ciphers around that data that allow calculations to be made, again, without necessarily requiring access to the raw data sets themselves that may be more sensitive. We're really excited about where this is going and the controls that it allows customers and other individuals to use and still unlock insights without necessarily having to sacrifice privacy or IP and trade secrets. These are a few of the technologies and pieces of software that we've made available. Azure Data Share is one that is a software tool that allows any entity to identify certain data sets that it can make available under certain conditions and with certain controls for third parties to then access and reuse. This provides customers and individuals with much more control over exactly which data they want to make available and in which formats they would like to make it available. We're continuing to release more on this across our cloud services, particularly for our commercial customers, but also our government customers, and all the way down to consumers. If you think about some of the changes to Microsoft Excel and Power BI, access to data sets, public or otherwise, that we can build into there. We're trying to make sure that we lead as much on the technology side as on the legal side, and certainly on the mindset shift that we're trying to bring. These are the collaboration principles that will guide all of our work in this space. We want this to be open, it needs to be usable, it needs to be empowering, secure. It goes without saying that, it's only as good as the format that it's made available in. If it's specific formats that don't work across every sector, we want to make sure this is interoperable as possible. There has to be security there. Without security, there's very little privacy. And at the same time, we don't want that to hold things back, but we don't want to minimize the challenge that's there either. We're hoping that, these principles, hopefully sharing these with policymakers in Europe, where I spend most of my time, anything that's guided by along these principles, we're really optimistic about some of the exciting results that can emerge here. A good example of what we're doing, we've launched the Open Data Policy Lab with the GovLab in New York University. These are supporting government decision makers at local, state, and national levels to accelerate responsible sharing of data, opening up more, identifying and then opening up more publicly held data sets that could be made available for researchers and companies in those jurisdictions to do more, combining that data with some of the data sets they may have on their own, and really doing a better mapping of what's out there and what could be made open. Moreover, we've partnered with the Open Data Institute in the United Kingdom. They're one of our key partners in this collaboration that we're trying to launch, really making sure that the collaborations that we're focused on identify along the challenges that we want to address, the type of principles that I just highlighted, and making sure that the outcomes here are available for reuse. Anything that we are engaging in under this open data campaign, we want to make sure it's an example that others can follow and that it provides results that others can use. These are not closed projects that only benefit the partners therein, but we want to make sure partners are coming together along with Microsoft to produce outcomes that can then be reused by others. And the Open Data Institute has been helping with a lot of our mapping and identifying the type of projects that can meet those aims. And just a few of the examples of what we've launched already. Earlier this year, we were proud with the Linux Foundation to announce the Climate Finance Foundation. Microsoft is providing data and platforms along with other players for companies and governments to better identify investment decisions in a sustainability context. We have additional examples that you see here, 20 by 2022. We expect to make 20 of these announcements by 2022. These are a few that we've announced already. And with the London Data Commission, we've been really excited about tapping into city sensor data and working with partners in that space to leverage certain data sets to help track COVID-19 transmissions. So it's a combination of public data, cloud technologies, and oversight from researchers looking into that to come out with outcomes that have really helped inform policymaking decisions about the COVID-19 crisis. I will stop there. There are a lot of examples that I get really excited about in an open data space, and we spend a lot of time in my role talking with policymakers about how to make this data more open and make it easier for people to share. But we're excited about this, and it doesn't mean that all of our data will be made available to everyone in any circumstance, in every scenario. But the more that we can open up data sets at Microsoft, the more that we can create tools for others to use, and the more we can lead with examples that I've just mentioned to show what benefits can come from this, we think there's a huge data opportunity here. And that data divide that I described earlier, we think that can be narrowed. If people have the tools, they have the mindset, and they have the legal frameworks that they need to feel more confident about being more open with data, we think that's a great thing. So happy to answer any questions about that and look forward to hearing from others about the ways they're approaching this space as well. Thank you.
Jeremy, thanks a lot. And the first question is for me is that recent years, huge corporations like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they started all open data activities like public open data repositories like Azure datasets collection and other projects. Why it's becoming a trend for big digital corporations? How it happened that it became so interesting for them?
It became interesting for us because our customers wanted it. If we have a manufacturing customer, as they continually digitally transform, assembly lines become more automated, they tap into sensor data from their products across the world, they're often using our cloud to store and analyze that data. The analytics there are always, exciting and insightful, but when you can combine that with other data sets, you can extract even more learnings. Anything we can do for customers to get better access to additional data sets, we want to be able to do that. I often use the example of manufacturing customers that are competitors. Often you'll see them located around water sources, for example, and they need to pay for access to those water sources for cooling purposes on assembly lines. Competitors are often right around the same water reservoir, and they need to pay for inputs and outputs to the water. They would never want to share the data with a competitor about their needs for cooling and the like. But if there's a third-party platform there that can say data can be put into this, what can happen is those players can essentially say, well, look, the outputs from one player are good enough for the inputs from another. What we can do, if there's a trusted intermediary at the middle, provide the type of insights that allow those competitors around a water source to understand, actually, I don't need to pay for as much water intake because I can get the outputs from another. And the reason I'm mentioning this example is those competitors would never want to share that data with each other. It would be too secret, too sensitive. If there's an intermediary, a platform in the middle that can host that data and only provide the insights from that, not the source material, you can have a lot of benefits and cost savings there. So Azure Datasets is also part of our value offering, where we want customers to use our cloud and benefit from the data that they can have access to. We would never divulge customer data, of course, but what we can do with encryption now and some of the different technologies that I mentioned earlier is allow people to get access to data that helps them inform the decisions that they're making. I think you see that across the industry, from not just manufacturing, but agriculture, climate, health in particular. We always hear in the context of AI that you can never have too much data. So if you can never have too much data, and there's anything that we can do as Microsoft to provide more data, it's a pretty justified business decision. I like to be open about that. Yeah.
Thank you. It sounds very great. You have now always enough data. You could get more, and it's nice to hear it that Microsoft has it on its focus. Thanks a lot. If we will have any more questions from our people who watch and hear us, we'll return with them. So, Godfrey, you're next, and I would ask you to start with your presentation and introducing yourself in your project.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for that. And thank you very much, Jeremy, for the really interesting discussion there about the great work that Microsoft is doing in open data. I will start by sharing my screen and just to check if you all can see my my screen. Right. Just let me know if you can see my screen and I can get started. Excellent. So I'd like to introduce myself first. I'm Godfrey Takawarasha, and I work with the United Nations. in a part of the United Nations called OCHA, which I'll just explain in a little bit. And I work on open data almost on a daily basis. So it's what I do for a living within the humanitarian system, and it is very interesting work that I'm going to tell you about today. So I work for the United Nations, but the United Nations is it's a big organization that deals with many different issues. So I work with the part of the United Nations that deals with humanitarian response. So we help coordinate all of the different actors that take part in providing assistance when large-scale international humanitarian situations arise. So it is called the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And inside of that Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, what we do is we bring together different actors to the table to form a common understanding of humanitarian situations. We advocate for solutions for people that are affected by humanitarian crisis, and we coordinate funding for humanitarian crisis on an annual basis. So within that OCHA, I work for what is called the Center for Humanitarian Data, whose job it is to increase the use and impact of data in humanitarian response. So you can imagine that in all of the different humanitarian contexts out there, there is a lot of data that is collected by different partners, and we want to see that data being used more to provide more effective assistance to people that are affected by humanitarian crisis. Right, so the Center for Humanitarian Data is based in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So we are a team of about 40 or so people with our main office in The Hague, but we also have presences in New York, in Geneva, as well as in Bucharest, where most of our development team is based. We also have data labs in Nairobi, in Dakar, Senegal, and in Jakarta, who are providing the same kind of services that our team provides, but more localized in those locations. So we are closer to where the humanitarian situations are. Right. So when we talk about humanitarian data, this is what we're about. But we talk about data in basically three different three buckets. So the first is data about the context of the crisis. So where is this crisis happening? What are the different administrative divisions? Where are the hospitals? Where are the roads? So this information is really critical in coordinating humanitarian crisis, and also in speaking from a common set of facts about the crisis. The second bucket of data is data about the people affected and their needs. So here the humanitarian organizations usually collect information about the numbers and locations of people who need different kinds of humanitarian assistance. And this type of information is also collected in different sectors of work, be it in health or in education or in food security. So we just want to bring this data together as well. So this is another set of data that we're interested in. And thirdly, it's data about the humanitarian response itself. Who are the partners that are involved in the response? What are they providing? Who is doing what and where? And this is critical, which is data that is critical for coordination of humanitarian work. So this is what we mean when we talk about humanitarian data. So the Center for Humanitarian Data, where I work, has 4 areas that we focus our work on, which is on data services, providing a variety of data services to the humanitarian community. We also have a focus on data responsibility. How does the humanitarian community work in a responsible manner with data? And provide tools and guidance to the humanitarian community to be more responsible in how they use data. Also, we work on data literacy, which is involved in upskilling the humanitarian community to become more adept and more have more skills working with data. So and also finally, our latest focus area is on predictive analytics, where we are helping the humanitarian community be more be less reactive and more proactive when they work with crisis. So to anticipate the next crisis, or to anticipate where we should pre-position supplies, and just to be less reactive and more proactive in how we handle everyday business. So I mentioned our data services work. In that, we have our flagship product called the Humanitarian Data Exchange, which I work on a daily basis, and I'll talk a little bit more about. But basically, the Humanitarian Data Exchange is a platform for humanitarians to openly share data. So if you're ever looking for open data relating to anything to do with humanitarian work or any crisis, such as, for instance, the current COVID crisis that everyone has been talking about, or different other crises in different parts of the world. For instance, in Yemen or in Syria, we do have data that can help inform those information. You can find them on the Humanitarian Data Exchange, and we also help create interoperability. And I also heard this being mentioned as well by Jeremy in this discussion, where that is an important area. So we support a standard called the Humanitarian Exchange Language, which is a simple standard for sharing data within the humanitarian community using spreadsheets, which is the ubiquitous way through which people sort of share data, although we are moving to more automated and more sophisticated methods of sharing within the sector. We also support the International Aid Transparency Initiative adoption within the humanitarian sector. So this is what we do in data services work. In data responsibility, we have led the development of the interagency standing committee, which is the ISC guidelines for data responsibility within the humanitarian community. So the interagency standing committee that I mentioned is let's just call it a body that is composed of all the heads of all of the major humanitarian organizations, and so makes a lot of decisions that are related to humanitarian policy, and we have worked with partners to develop a data responsibility sort of guidelines and tools for the humanitarian sector that we are currently promoting. And we also in this work support on a day-to-day basis the offices for our own organization, OCHA, so about 30 or so field offices to deal with issues that have data responsibility aspect to them. And then in data literacy, as I mentioned, we increase training. We train humanitarians to be more skillful in using data. So most humanitarians who come from a lot of humanitarians come from a liberal arts sort of background, and we have been involved in trying to bridge the gap between that and the more technical topics that are inherent in working with data. In the past, we used to provide remote and so we used to provide in-person training, but with the advent of COVID-19, we've been switching also to more remote methods of working, as well as other modalities, such as videos and tip sheets and other ways that we can improve the data literacy within the community. And finally, in predictive analytics, we've been developing new predictive models to support humanitarian action, as well as supporting existing partner models in the sector. So we have an OCHA-Baki model that we developed that is being used in several countries, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, to predict subnational COVID cases and deaths, which is proving to be very useful in those countries for planning purposes, especially on non-pharmaceutical interventions in those areas. We also provide manage peer review frameworks for partners, so that as people are developing models, we can have the confidence in how those models have been developed, that they have technical rigor, as well as that they are also ethical. They've gone through ethical reviews and technical reviews. So that is how we are supporting in terms of predictive analytics. So this is the Humanitarian Data Exchange. We have about 100,000 plus visitors that visit the site, unique visitors every month, looking for humanitarian data. It is the go-to place for humanitarian data. Over 18,000 data sets shared by over 250 organizations that are contributing data to the platform. So it's data.humdata.org, and you can also use the QR code to go to the site. Just mentioned some of our statistics, but I just wanted to mention one of the ways that we make data easier to find out of those 18,000 is to arrange them, to organize them around a data grid that organizes the humanitarian data around 6 different categories of data, 27 subcategories, and we also curate those data sets and make it clear to the users, the status of the data, whether the data is complete, incomplete, or is missing for those categories. And we do this for 27 countries that are of interest to our work. And we use this data to produce what we call the State of Open Humanitarian Data Report. We just recently released a few weeks ago for the report for 2021, which is available, and you can also read that, which is an interesting read on what the availability of data within the open data within the humanitarian sector. I mentioned Hexel, which is the standard for sharing spreadsheets, which is very easy to work with. Just adding a new, each is based on hashtags that are added within the data. So it is a low tech way that is also can be easily used by some of our partners who are not as technically advanced as others. I just wanted to, at the end of the day, we put this data together, and part of the way that we use the data is also to visualize it, so it can be accessible to more people than than the techies, but more for policymakers and so forth. So here is our COVID-19 data explorer, which we have been working on, and it puts together about over 25 different sources of data around the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is now focused, but the data is focused on the countries that are of interest to humanitarians. And I would invite you to also go and have a look, so you can find information about the cases, about food insecurity in these different places. So it's a great tool for humanitarians to contextualize COVID-19 within the humanitarian sector. We also do data stories for advocacy purposes. So this one here that I'm showing you is about, tells the story of one family's journey of 600 kilometers in search of safety, using data that has been shared on the platform and in other places. This one is on Ebola feedback. This was from the, last year, I believe, which is also used by our team in the field to understand the rumors around Ebola that were happening at the time. So it was a really great advocacy tool. And other visualizations on education. Another one on displacement in South Sudan, also using data to tell a story. And many more. So this one is also around displacement, developed by our partner organization, the International Organization for Migration, showing internal displacements. And this, I think I will end my presentation on this one, which sort of shows the power of open data and how by opening data we can lead to greater outcomes. So when we started, and this is a long time ago, in 2014, thereabouts, the data for the Ebola crisis then was all locked up in PDF files. Then we had to work to put the data into a more open and accessible format, which was later picked up by the New York Times and then placed on the front page of the New York Times, and really helped to amplify the story about what was happening at that time with the Ebola virus, and really was really great for advocacy. But that would never have happened if we had not taken the efforts and the steps to make the data that was locked away in these PDFs into something that is that can be used and was also accessible for everyone to use. So I think I will end on this note, and invite any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Godfrey, thanks you a lot. It's very interesting, and quite impressed on this project. Humanitarian Data Exchange for us is an example of great implementation of CKN data catalog and integrated everything. Data standard and data exchange. And the most interesting for me is how did you convince some big cats like Facebook to share data with your project? I know that Facebook Data for Good is also published on Humanitarian Data. And how and why commercial companies share the data with Humanitarian Data Exchange?
No, thank you very much for that question, which is a very interesting and important question. So there are many reasons why organizations sometimes share data and sometimes why they do not share data. But in this case, the Facebook team, the Facebook for Data team, was looking for a place where they could make their data available, because they already had this, they collected this data, developed this data set, and we're looking for a place where they could sort of distribute the data, get it used by different people, and the Humanitarian Data Exchange happened to be the best place for that sort of distribution of data that is useful for humanitarians, for people in development work, but also for the greater public. We went into discussions with the team, and it and then it eventually ended up with us agreeing to be the home for this data. And it is a very popular data set and very useful, specifically in humanitarian action. When there is a let's say a hurricane or something like that happens, and it doesn't really follow the normal or the usual admin boundaries. It can be very random, and this kind of data allows humanitarians to be able to quickly, very, very quickly, come up with population estimates that would have taken a long time using, I mean, in the past. So this has been very useful, this kind of data for us and the humanitarian community, especially to come up with population estimates of people affected by these sudden onset disasters like hurricanes and floods and the like. So we are very grateful for that.
Godfrey, thanks a lot. It was very interesting. So we are going to the next speaker. It's Sarkis Darbinian. Sarkis, please, I would like you to start.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here. My name is Sarkis Darbinian. I'm a co-founder of Russian NGO Roskom Svoboda, focused on protection of digital rights and access to data. And I'm a managing partner at the Digital Rights Center. So I would just talk a little about the international regulation of open data, what is happening globally, and what problems we face right now here in Russia for working with big data. And first of all, we should look at ongoing initiatives worldwide to understand what is going on in other countries with open data. And as we see there comes a lot of different initiatives, state initiatives, that shows us how the open data should be used and how it should be administrated by the different players, local governments, city governments, and federal governments. One of these services, example services, is price paid data in UK. The owner of the raw data on which the service is based is the English government. So the main functionality of the service is to provide publicly detailed information on transactions since 1995, monthly and annually, including an overall summary. And it tracks residential property sales in England and Wales, which are submitted to the National Registry for registration. The set consists of 24 million records from January 95, and you can download the information in 3 versions: last month's data, a file of the for the year, and for the whole time since 1995. Another initiative, for me, it's also very interesting initiative, is a major projects authority. So the service works with the Treasury and other government departments to provide independent assurance on major projects. And the service also supports agency colleagues, helping to build skills and improve the way projects are managed and delivered. Spot crime, the service from the United States of America, is a kind of public map showing crime on a map, and the service is rated as the largest aggregator of the crime data in the US. And this is a really helpful data for lawyers and still for NGOs that are working with the data. Portal Transparencia from Brazil is a tool to improve fiscal transparency of the Brazilian federal government using open governmental budget data. And with the increase in the quality and quantity of data on the portal, on the website over the past decade, the transparent spending portal is now one of the country's main anti-corruption tools. Each month, an average of 900,000 unique users register on the site, and local governments throughout Brazil and in 3 other Latin American countries have created similar financial transparency initiatives along the lines of the website. Another good example Onrata Instanta from Romania, and this service aims to improve the Romanian justice system and also fight corruption. The service increases transparency by providing data through an interactive and user-friendly platform, and shows the highest courts in Romania according to the performance index. Spend Network, another service from the UK that provides public data information in a much more user-friendly way. The Cost Network can be considered as a database for sales between buyers and suppliers, as well as wider Europe tenders. And for sure, when we are talking about open data, we should also always understand that we should understand that it is global initiatives every time, and governments and private companies should should work together in a collaboration for getting the better results and to give more data to the society. And for that purpose was created the Open Data Charter. It's a kind of collaboration between over 150 governments and organizations, also local governments working to open up data based on a shared set of principles. And it's pretty interesting that from our region, Ukraine and recently Uzbekistan joined the initiative, and there is still no Russia as a member of this initiative, and no any federal or local governments working with this initiative. When we are talking about the Open Data Charter and how it works, we should say that it is based on principle of Open Data Chapter, but there is a lot of other standards. It's not the only one. Other standards were created in the Open Data Initiative on Project Open Data, Frictionless Data, and Johns Hopkins University, and they have a little bit different, but still they have this almost the same basis for making work with the open data clear for all the players, and what should they do to provide this open data without a violation of the rights of other people, especially we talk about sensitive data that can harm some human rights. And when talking about open data, we always face three issues. Three legal issues. The first one is the legal framework that can ensure the publication of open data by particular state and governments. And still there becomes a big problem because we don't have that clear rules, clear laws that will ensure us that government will publish that data as we expected to have opened. For sure, there is a legal issue with related to the published data themselves, and the licenses regulating the use of data. That comes a kind of copyright issue, how this data can be offered to the society. One of the main principles working with open data is a principle that is called open by default. And I would say that in global practice, an important direction of this regulatory development is the introduction in the legislation of the principle of open by default. frankly, in Russia right now, we don't have this kind of principle, and our regulation, our national regulation, does not use this principle as well, and that's why we understand that most of the data stored remain inaccessible for people. Open data is a critical component for developing artificial intelligence, and that's why a lot of players and governments and different actors now understanding that problem are trying to get as much data as they can, and also to provide this data for those who are working with artificial intelligence. And the European Union monitors the use of open data for AI systems, and such kind of international organization as a Web Foundation conducts research on the use of open data in AI and the moral and ethical principles on the use of this kind of new technologies. Sensitive information could be published within the sets of open data, and that also becomes a problem because we shouldn't allow that kind of things, but sometimes they happen, and still we have that legal instruments like, you know, Convention 108 and GDPR restrictions in Europe that obey company not publish that kind of data. Russia is also a member of Convention 108, and for sure should obey that convention in that manner. And sometimes Russian companies that also use on the European market have to comply with the European rules, and generally GDPR influence not only European companies, but I would say globally, because even big Russian companies working on European market have to change their rules, have to change their policies to comply with the strict GDPR regulation. If talking about licensing, we would say that there are a lot of legal tools for now for licensing data sets and contents, and they're all available for different companies and states that are going to publish the data. We can say that all of the licenses can be divided on commercial property and non-commercial free licenses, and we have different tools that being used in software publishing. There are BSD license as more popular licenses for publishing data sets, and they allow other actors that want to use this data do whatever they want with the data without violation of the copyright of the dataset owner. For other content, we have Creative Commons, and that becomes the best and most available thing for users and for dataset owners to operate with data, and you can choose any license you want and what fits your requests more. Still, I would say that there are big issues that are connected with the publication of sensitive data, and data aggregation and integration projects are always in a balance between respecting, from one side, the public interest and non-disclosure of data restricted for publication. And as we see, sometimes it happens that the data is being published, but then it's being deleted to the disclosure of personal user data. And there are a lot of such examples in many countries where creators of digital services were forced to remove or correct previously published public data. So the privacy regulation influenced a lot on the exchange and turnover of open data. And now in Russia, we face the changing of that privacy regulation that can for sure also influence on this issue too. Well, we have very little of time, so I would say that I'm finished with that. Thank you.
Sarkis, thanks a lot. And we have a question. We have a question probably for all of our speakers. So probably Jeremy, Godfrey, and Sarkis, you would like to answer if anyone of you would like. One of our watchers of our video asking is that last years in Russia, we see how government starts to close the data. And not to open too much, but to review some previous openness policies and to close the data when it feels to be too sensitive. What do you feel about other countries? Is it a global trend or it's more Russian specific? Jeremy?
Yeah, I can answer that. It's not Russian specific. We do see that in other countries. And I think listen, sometimes it's understandable. I think there are certain data sets that we can all acknowledge, are not appropriate for reuse. We don't expect anybody to be making, Department of Defense and military data available open online for everyone to access. But different countries do draw the line there a bit differently. And I think Sarkis mentioned this open by default principle. I think you have to start from that. We want to see governments increasingly start with an open by default. And I think we've seen some progress on that in Europe. In Europe, further to the Public Sector Information Directive, member states have been asked to increasingly identify greater amounts of public data that can be made available. That's the good news. The bad news is that we do see sometimes out of economic interests, member states and countries starting to restrict some of that public data, making it only available to certain segments of researchers or to certain companies or to certain players. I think that's unfortunate, but it really, every country does put the line a little bit differently. The good news, I think, is that we're seeing 2 steps forward and sometimes 1 step back. I think we're moving in a more open direction. But there will be examples around the world where sometimes we go a little bit backward. But it's not just a Russian problem. I think we've seen it in Europe. If you look at some of the Baltic countries who've been really, really open with some of this, even the country that I live in, Belgium, has made some of this data more open, where sometimes places like France, Germany, make it open and then make it more restricted. And then they go open it and then it goes back. But I think we're making progress in the right direction, but it's not just a Russian problem.
Jeremy, thank you. It's quite optimistic. So, Godfrey, what would you say?
So I wanted also just to come in and echo what Jeremy has been saying, and also just to give a perspective from our humanitarian world, where yes, we really work toward open data where that is possible, but we have to also keep in mind that there is privacy issues, and in fact, one of the things that we do on the Humanitarian Data Exchange platform is to check each and every data set that is shared on the platform, to check it against just to make sure that it doesn't contain any data that is obviously sensitive, like names of people, phone numbers, data that could identify people, but also data that could be in combination with other pieces of data be used to identify people. That's another thing. And we've gone a step further, to be very objective in how we do this assessment. So we make use of statistical disclosure control methods, and we use a tool called STC Micro that was originally developed by the World Bank to actually calculate the disclosure risk that a data set might have, and then based on that calculation and that assessment, make a decision on whether or not we would allow the data set to be published publicly as an open data set on our platform, or alternatively to take measures to treat the data set, maybe by suppressing different methods of treatment for the data set before it can be shared on the platform. So I just wanted to echo that and say it's not necessarily a Russian phenomena, but I think it's something that we are going to continue to see more of as we, especially when we look at more around issues of privacy of people and how to protect people's privacy.
Thanks a lot. So it's nice to hear that we are not the only country that sees phenomena, but still we want to see more open countries, including our. So Sarkis, probably some final words about these questions, and we'll finalize our session.
Well, yeah, I'm not so much, acquainted with what is going on abroad, but what we see from Russia, that we still have a lot of work to do to make open by default a main principle in Russia, and to make Russia join most open data initiatives to be on the board. And that's what is the direction we gotta go right now.
Sarkis, thanks a lot. So I would like also to introduce that we started in Russia a little project with Microsoft support about educational resources and instruments, and we launched our collaboration with Humanitarian Data Exchange, publishing data about COVID-19 in Russia. So probably international collaboration is one of our big priorities for Russia in next year, and starting from this, we a bit was self-isolated last years, but probably it's time to change it. So thanks a lot for joining this session today. It was very great to see and to hear you all, and thanks to everybody who watched us this Saturday. So any final word if you would like, if not, so thanks once again.
Have a great Saturday. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great Saturday. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.